A very warm welcome to today's session. In this session, we are going to cover the current affairs of Indian economy from the past 1 week. हम इस सेशन में देखेंगे कि क्या-क्या न्यूज़ में रहा है with respect to Indian economy. First, we are going to see a basic concept of inflation, यानी कि महंगाई. सबसे प्रमुख कॉन्सेप्ट जो इंडियन इकोनॉमी में रहता है वो है महंगाई का, और आजकल भी ये न्यूज़ में चल रहा है. Then after inflation, we will be seeing what is stagflation. What is the stagflation that has been marked by the Ministry of Finance as a possible threat to Indian economy. After that, we will see what is foreign portfolio investment. That is, विदेशी portfolio investment क्या होता है, विदेशी portfolio निवेश क्या होता है. After that, we will be seeing what is twin deficit, यानी कि द्वितीय घाटा क्या होता है. इसमें चालू घाटा यानी कि करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट एंड राजकोषीय घाटा यानी कि फिस्कल डेफिसिट. व्हाट आर दीज टू डेफिसिट्स एंड हाउ आर दे कंसर्न फॉर द इंडियन इकोनॉमी. आफ्टर दैट वी विल बी सीइंग व्हाट इज फर्टिलाइजर सब्सिडी. फर्टिलाइजर सब्सिडी यानी कि उर्वरक राज सहायता, एंड हाउ इज इट इंपॉर्टेंट येट अ थ्रेट to the stability of the fiscal economics. And then we will be seeing small news snippets with respect to past week and what can be important for the prelims examination of the upcoming year. So let's begin. So the very first concept that we are going to discuss is that of inflation. Inflation has been in news for quite some time now, and because of that inflation, the economies are acting up. For example, you might have heard about the US Federal Reserve Bank raising the interest rates by 0.75%, यानी कि 75 बेसिस पॉइंट का US के फेडरल रिजर्व बैंक ने जो इंटरेस्ट रेट बढ़ाए हैं वो बस इसी इन्फ्लेशन की वजह से बढ़ाए हैं. हमारे भारतीय रिजर्व बैंक यानी कि आर रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया हैज आल्सो इंक्रीज्ड द रेपो रेट बाय 50 basis point because of inflation. See, so inflation का जानना हमारे लिए बहुत महत्वपूर्ण हो जाता है. So what really is inflation? Inflation is a general rise in price of goods and services across the economy. यानी कि inflation कुछ नहीं, महंगाई होती है. ठीक है, जो पिछले साल चीज हमें 100 रुपए में मिल रही थी, what we were getting for ₹100 past year, and now we are getting for 105 rupees. That is inflation. जो चीज पिछले साल 100 रुपए में थी और इस साल 105 रुपए में है, तो हम कह सकते हैं कि there is an inflation of 5% year on year. यानी कि इन्फ्लेशन की दर, मुद्रास्फीति की दर 5% है साल दर साल. So inflation is the very basic concept of economics. Now, who is tasked with the responsibility of managing inflation in India? Can you answer in comments, please? Who is responsible for maintaining optimum level of inflation in India? मुद्रास्फीति की ऑप्टिमम दर बनाने के लिए कौन जिम्मेदार है भारत में? It's रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया, यानी कि भारतीय रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया is tasked with maintaining optimum inflation levels in the country. Okay, now first thing is that, and what is the range between which the RBI has to maintain that inflation? प्लीज आंसर इन द कमेंट्स. वो क्या रेंज है, मुद्रास्फीति की क्या रेंज है जिसमें आरबीआई को वो मेंटेन करके रखनी पड़ती है? डू यू नो? प्लीज आंसर इन द कमेंट्स, प्लीज आंसर इन द चैट बॉक्स. इफ यस, मिस अनीता इज सेइंग द राइट आंसर. इट इज 2 to 6%. वेरी गुड, 2 to 6%. This is the range between which RBI has to maintain inflation rate in India. Okay, now see, if the inflation goes beyond this range, यानी कि अगर मुद्रास्फीति की दर 6% से ऊपर हो गई, तो RBI क्या करता है? It increases the repo rate. It increases the repo rate. Okay, and if the inflation is below 2%, then what does RBI do? It decreases the repo rate. Now, the idea behind increasing repo rate or decreasing repo rate is that it controls the money supply in the economy. think of it, if you are getting loan at the rate of 10%, अगर आप किसी बैंक में गए और आपने ऋण मांगा and they are saying that we will give you at the 10% rate of interest, ठीक है, so will you be willing to take that loan? Or in other scenario, if you go to bank and ask for a loan and they ask you for a 5% rate of interest loan, they are asking for 5% rate of interest, which is more attractive, 10% or 5%? If you are taking a loan, obviously it will be 5%, because then you will have to pay lower rate of interest on your loans. Okay, so when interest rate increases in economy, the money supply decreases, and when money supply decreases, the inflation will also go down. Now I am telling you this concept beforehand for all the things, for all the slides to come. Okay, so this will form the basis of your knowledge for this session. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, yeah, so we have seen that inflation targeting is 2 to 6%. It is the responsibility of RBI to manage inflation, and inflation is the general increase in price of goods and services across the economy. Now let's see what are the impacts of inflation. मुद्रास्फीति के क्या क्या प्रभाव पड़ते हैं हमारी भारतीय अर्थव्यवस्था पे. First is that it reduces the people's purchasing power. It reduces the purchasing power of people. Okay, now think of it. If you go to a market to buy 1 kilogram of tomatoes, आप टमाटर लेने गए बाजार में, and at one point of time you are getting it rupees 30 per kg, and at another point of time you are getting it at 60 rupees per kg. Now this rate increase can be termed as inflation. हम महंगाई तो कहते हैं, अगर बाजार में टमाटर आलू इन सब के भाव बढ़ जाते तो हम क्या कहते हैं कि महंगाई बढ़ गई. We say that there is inflation. Okay, now you got 30 rupees in your pocket. Before you could have bought 1 kilogram of tomatoes, and now those 30 rupees were able to buy you only half kilogram of tomatoes. So it means that purchasing power of your money has decreased. Okay, do you understand the first impact of inflation? Please type yes if you have understood it. Please type yes if you have understood it, or type no if you did not. Okay, now, okay, yes, I'm glad we all are on the same page. Now the second impact of inflation is that it reduces the non-essential demand. It reduces the non-essential demand means that, think of it, if you are planning to go on a vacation, now if the prices are increasing in an economy, the cost to upkeep your household is increasing, will you be planning to go on vacation? Because it is a non-essential demand. ठीक है, अगर घर गृहस्थी चलाने की महंगाई बढ़ रही है तो आप क्या सोचेंगे कि हम कहीं घूम के आते हैं? ऑब्वियसली नहीं, आप सोचेंगे कि नहीं, अभी हम अपना घर संभालेंगे एंड हम बाद में पोस्टपोन कर देते हैं इस चीज को कि बाद में घूमने चले जाएंगे. सो द सेकंड इंपैक्ट ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन इज दैट इट रिड्यूसेस द नॉन एसेंशियल डिमांड. ओके, now the third impact of inflation is it harms the savers and helps the borrowers. It is a very important impact. Okay, it can come in prelims examination as it is. How does it harm the savers? Now think of it. You are putting your money in the savings bank account of State Bank of India, and they are offering you 3.5% rate of interest. Okay, they are offering you 3.5% rate of interest, and the inflation in economy is at 6%. If the inflation in economy is at 6% and they are offering you just 3.5% rate of interest, it means that you are essentially losing out on your savings. You are essentially losing out of your savings. So if you put 100 rupees in your savings bank account, अगर आप अपने सेविंग खाते में 100 रुपए डालते हैं तो अगले साल जाके आपको 103.5 रुपए मिलेंगे. 103.5 rupees you will get next year. Okay, but the next year your purchasing power would have decreased by this much percentage because of inflation. ओके सो जो पिछले साल चीज 100 रुपए की थी वो अगले साल 106 रुपए की है, बट आपने सेविंग करी है जो 100 रुपए की वो बस 103.5 तक ही हो पाई है. सो द थर्ड इंपैक्ट ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन इज दैट you will lose out on savings and it will help borrowers. Okay, how will it help borrowers? See, borrowers are those who borrow money. Okay, now if you are borrowing money today, say you are borrowing money rupees 100 today, this money has more purchasing power capacity, this has more purchasing capacity than the next year if the inflation is rupees 6%, and though if the inflation is at rupees 6% at the rate of 6%, okay, and if you are borrowing 100 rupees today, the purchasing capacity of both these 100 and 106 will be same, but the borrowers, if they are borrowing at some rate of interest that is less than this, then they will lose out on it, they will benefit from inflation. Okay, so borrowers will benefit from inflation and it harms savers. Okay, so this is the third impact of inflation. Okay, do you understand it? Please type yes or no if you do not. Now the fourth impact of inflation, is that it worsens the exchange rate. How does it worsen the exchange rate? See, if the inflation is present in an economy, then it essentially means that the purchasing capacity of that rupee is decreasing. Now the purchasing capacity of that rupee is decreasing means its value is decreasing. Do you concur or not? Do you agree with me or not? Inflation leads to decrease in value of currency. The purchasing capacity is decreasing and hence its value is decreasing. Do you agree? Okay, so its purchasing capacity is decreasing. It means that if we compare it to other currency, say dollar, then it will depreciate. Okay, it will lose out its value. Okay, that is why it means the impact of inflation is that it worsens the exchange rate. High inflation means the rupee is losing its power, and if the RBI does not raise interest rates fast enough, investors will increasingly stay away because of reduced returns. Okay, now the next impact of inflation is that it leads to higher expectations of higher inflation for tomorrow. Okay, if inflation is present today, you are likely to think that inflation will also be present tomorrow. So what happens is that a very interesting thing happens, that inflation that is rising prices today. Okay, now the household will think that inflation is present today, it will also be present tomorrow and maybe even at a higher rate. So what do? Household provide workers to factories, so they ask for higher wages from their employers. Okay, they ask for higher wages from their employers, and if they ask for higher wages, then the cost of production will increase. And if the cost of production will increase, will that lead to increasing prices or decreasing prices? Please tell me in the chat box, will it lead to increasing prices or decreasing prices? What do we call the wages? It is the factor cost, no? So if the factor cost is increasing, will it lead to increasing prices in the economy or decreasing? Very good. Kanu is saying yes, it will increase. Vasu Tomar is saying increase. Shreya Dikshit is saying yes, it will increase. So we all are on the same page. Very good. So if the prices of production are increasing in the economy, what does this mean? It means that inflation will increase. So it essentially means that people are expecting higher inflation in the future, and what they are expecting is actually leading to higher inflation in the future. So this is what wage price spiral is. Okay, it forms a kind of cycle that people are expecting there will be more inflation in the future, and because of that they will be demanding higher wages. The higher wages lead to cost of production increase and consequently to the higher inflation. Okay, so this is wage price spiral, one of the impact of inflation. Furthermore, the sixth impact of inflation is very important. It is very important because it will lead to what we can say is the growth inflation conflict. Okay, now see, if inflation is there in the economy. Okay, inflation is there because demand is more. Okay, now if demand of some product is more, say for example there is a biscuit demand increase in the economy, people are demanding more biscuits. Okay, so what does the factory do? It tries to increase the production of biscuits, okay, so as to fulfill that demand. Now when it is increasing the production of that biscuits, say by establishing another factory of biscuit making, then it essentially means that there is expansion in the economy, there is growth in the economy, because one more factory has been set up just to fulfill that demand. Do you understand this? See, if inflation is there, there will be higher prices. Higher prices means demand is more, and if demand of something is more, it means that supply will consequently increase to fulfill that demand, and for increasing that supply, new infrastructure is set up, and because of that economic growth is a result. Okay, it is the resultant of economic growth. So this is the sixth impact of inflation, that short term, for short term there will be increase in economic growth, and that is why inflation is associated with economic growth. इसी कारण मुद्रास्फीति इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ से रिलेटेड रहती है. ठीक है, so these are the impacts. This is the most important impact because you will be needing it for the future concepts. Okay, so let's move on. So what are the causes of inflation? See, the causes of inflation can be divided into two parts. First is the demand pull inflation and the second is cost push inflation. ठीक है, demand pull inflation essentially means if something is more in demand, then its price will increase. Okay, Kanu is saying it also increases inequality. Yes, it does, because the poor are more affected than the rich class when there is inflation in the economy. Very good, it's a very good point. Okay, anyway, what are the causes of inflation? First is the demand pull and second is cost push inflation. So demand pull inflation means when there is greater demand in the economy, then it leads to price increase because law of demand and supply. Okay, so let's see, occurs when there is an increase in aggregate demand and categorized by the four sections of the macroeconomy: households, business, governments and foreign buyers, that is who will demand those products. And then when concurrent demand for output exceeds what the economy can produce, the four sectors compete to purchase. Okay, now see, for example, there is a piece of paper here. Okay, there is a piece of paper here. Now this piece of paper has been produced in the economy. Now let's say that only this paper has been produced in the economy this month. Okay, and there are buyers. The one buyer is saying that I will buy this piece of paper at ₹100. The other buyer comes that and he or she says that I need this piece of paper and I'll buy it for ₹200. So there is a sort of competition that emerges to buy that product, and that is why the price of this paper is increasing and hence the inflation in the economy increases because demand is more than what supply is there. ये चीज आपको समझ में आई? Do you understand it? So this is what is demand pull inflation. That example of biscuit factory, it was demand pull. The demand for biscuits was increasing in the economy and hence the owner of that biscuit factory established one or more biscuit factories so as to fulfill that demand. So this is demand pull inflation. The second is very important, cost push inflation, यानी कि मूल्य वृद्धि मुद्रास्फीति. So the cost push inflation is when the supply is not able to cope up with the demand. The supply is less. And why the supply is less? Why the supply is more expensive? Because of the backward integration. For example, if the price or cost of fuels go up in the economy, अगर डीजल और पेट्रोल के प्राइस बढ़ते हैं तो what does this lead to? Overall inflation. But it is not because of the demand, it is because of the supply. So what happens is that cost of petrol or diesel increase. ठीक है, now the truck that is transporting those tomatoes that you were to buy will have to pay more money for petrol and diesel, and hence the transportation cost for that tomato increase. Okay, this is one thing. Now consider in a year the rainfall is less, and because of less rainfall the crop of tomatoes fail. Okay, so that means now less tomatoes are produced in that economy. So two things are there: petrol diesel prices are increasing. Okay, first thing. Second thing is the production of tomato is less in that year, and because of that the supply is either less or expensive, and this is what is cost push inflation is. Okay, this is what cost push inflation is. ठीक है? And this cost push inflation is very important for you to understand before going on to the concept of stagflation. Kanu is saying supply needs gestation period, so supply cannot increase immediately to match demand. Yeah, actually there is a short term and long term thing. Okay, in short term obviously the supply cannot match demand, but over a period of time the supply will have to increase to match that demand, and that is when the inflation will come down. But that is not of concern to us in this concept. Okay, so let's move on. So this is a question from prelims 2022. Let's attempt previous year questions now. Okay, this is the first question. In India, which one of the following is responsible for maintaining price stability by controlling inflation? Okay, please answer in the chat box. Is it Department of Consumer Affairs? Is it Expenditure Management Commission? Is it Fiscal Stability and Development Council FSDC, or is it Reserve Bank of India RBI? Please answer in the chat box what is the answer of this question that came in prelims 2022. इस सवाल का क्या जवाब होगा प्लीज बताएं. Okay, Vasu Tomar is saying D, Yamandeep is saying D, Ms. Shreya is saying RBI, Mr. Bittu is saying D. Okay, all of you are having the correct answer. It is D. Reserve Bank of India is concerned with maintaining optimum level of inflation in an economy. We just discussed this. Okay, now let's see the next question. It is the question from prelims 2015. With reference to inflation in India, which of the following statements is correct? First is controlling the inflation in India is the responsibility of Government of India only. The second statement is the Reserve Bank of India has no role in controlling the inflation. The third is decreased money circulation. Decreased money circulation helps in controlling the inflation. Okay, and the fourth is increased money circulation helps in controlling the inflation. Money circulation is essentially the money supply. Okay, so what is the answer of this question now? Increased money circulation helps in controlling the inflation, or decreased money circulation helps in controlling the inflation? Ms. Shreya is saying C, Mr. Yamandeep is saying C, Rushi is saying C. Okay, so all of you are applying the same concept. No, that money supply decrease leads to lower inflation. Is it yes or no? You are applying this concept only, na? Ki money supply is decreasing and that is why inflation will also decrease. Yes, you are applying this concept only. Answer me one more thing. Money supply will decrease when RBI will increase its repo rate, or will it decrease its repo rate? For money supply to decrease, will the RBI increase its repo rate or decrease its repo rate? Please answer in the chat box. For money supply to decrease, will the RBI increase its repo rate or decrease? Okay, Mr. Bittu is saying increase, Kanu is saying increase repo rate, Mishra is saying increase. Okay, Rushi is saying increase, Vasudha is saying increase. Okay, awesome. So we all are on the same page that for money supply to decrease, RBI has to increase its repo rate, and that is why recently Reserve Bank of India has increased its repo rate by 50 basis points. Okay, that is why only, to control the inflation in Indian economy. Okay, now let's move on to the next question. Okay, the answer is C only from the UPSC answer key. Now this is a prelims question from 2013. I'll read it out to you. A rise in general level of prices may be caused by an increase in the money supply, a decrease in the aggregate level of output, and increase in the effective demand. Okay, please answer this question. A rise in general level of prices. What is rise in general level of prices? It is inflation only. It is inflation. Okay, Inflation only. Now, inflation is caused by increase in money supply. Is the first statement correct or not? Or the second statement, a decrease in aggregate level of output. Second statement, please don't be confused by the second statement. The second statement essentially means that a decrease in level of supply. Aggregate output, decrease in level of supply. Okay. So, Mr. Vasu is saying D. Rushi is saying A. Rushi, please provide your justification for A. And the rest of students, Miss Shreya is saying D, Kanu is saying D, Vasu Tomar is saying D, and Bittu is saying D. Okay, Rushi, A is not the correct answer here. A is not the correct answer. See, the first statement is correct. And increase in money supply. Money supply increase means there will be inflation. Okay, first statement is correct. A lower level of supply will also lead to inflation. Okay, and the third. Okay, sorry sir, I have not seen the question. That's okay. That's totally okay. And the third statement is an increase in effective demand. If the demand is increasing, then there will be demand pull inflation. Okay. So, all of you are providing the correct answer. That's great. The answer of this question is 82D as per the answer key of UPSC again. Now, answer this one question for me, please. Okay. Consider the following statement. Inflation benefits the debtors. Inflation benefits the debtors. Debtors are those who have taken loans. Creditors are those who have given loans. Okay, debtors are those who has taken loan. यानी कि debtors कौन होते हैं? जो ऋणी होते हैं. ठीक है? Now, the second statement is inflation benefits the bond holders. The second statement is inflation benefits the bond holders. Okay. Now, what is the answer of this question? It's a typical question. It's a very different kind of question, a difficult one. What is the answer of this question? Inflation benefits the debtors. See, inflation benefits the debtors essentially means those who are borrowing. We have understood one of the impact of inflation is that it harms the savers, but it benefits the borrowers. We have seen that, yes? So, it benefits the debtors. That is the correct statement. And inflation benefits the bond holders. Okay, now this statement, please, we will understand this statement at a very basic level. What is a bond, student? A bond is a piece of paper on which the price of the bond is mentioned, the interest rate or the coupon rate of the bond is mentioned, and the maturity period is mentioned. So, when you are giving out bond to someone, it essentially means that you are borrowing money, and the one who is holding the bond is essentially providing you the money. Okay, he or she who is holding the bond is essentially providing you the money. So, inflation benefits the bond holders. Does inflation benefit the person who has given to the borrower? Okay, either one of this statement can be true. And the answer of this question is A only, as many of you are providing the correct answer. Vasu has provided the correct answer. Kanu has provided the correct answer. Rakesh has said that decrease it repo rate. Okay, that is the answer of previous question. Bittu is saying both are correct. And Yamandeep 1 A. Okay, so Bittu has corrected his or her answer that yes, the only one is correct. 66 ka answer hai A as per the answer key of UPSC. Now we have understood what is inflation. What is inflation? We have understood. Now let's move on to the next concept that has been in news because Ministry of Finance released something called monthly policy review. Okay, and in that it has mentioned the word stagflation. We have to keep watch of such words. Stagflation is a very basic and concept and a word, keyword that you can use in your mains answer also. But we have to keep watch of such words so as to learn more about them as they can be asked in the prelims examination. Now let's see what is stagflation. So previously in inflation we have seen that the inflation is related to the economic growth. Okay, the one thing that I told you about with the help of the biscuit factory is that if the demand is increasing, there will be inflation and supply will have to increase, because of which there will be economic growth. Now, how many of you know the formula of GDP? How many of you know the formula of GDP? What is the formula of GDP? There are three ways to calculate GDP, but one of the most popular way is to make is the summation of consumption plus investment plus government expenditure plus net exports. Do you know this formula? C, consumption plus investment plus government expenditure plus net exports. Net exports means exports minus imports. Okay, Kanu is saying C plus 1 plus G plus X minus M. Kanu is saying unemployment accompanied with inflation. If there is inflation, the employment will also increase because there will be increase in supply. Okay, this concept is related to Phillips curve but is outside the scope of our discussion here, and that is why we have not discussed it here. Anyway, B2 is also mentioned, C plus I plus G plus X minus M, correct? Okay, so what is the C here? C here is the consumption. Now, if the consumption in economy is increasing, it means first thing that GDP will increase, and the second thing will mean that there is demand in the economy, because of which there can be inflation. So we have found two ways to relate inflation with economic growth. Okay, if the consumption in economy is high, it means that there is demand, and if the consumption is high, it also means that there is higher GDP of the economy. Okay? And the second is that when there is higher demand, the supply also has to increase. So, do you agree that inflation is somewhat related to economic growth, a optimum level of inflation? Okay? But there is a contradiction. There is a contradiction, a big one. In 1970s, when the OPEC nations, that is a cartel that controls the oil supply, एक कार्टेल जो ऑयल सप्लाई को कंट्रोल करता है दुनिया भर में, उसने अपने तेल के दाम बढ़ा दिए, and because of those increase in oil prices, what happened was stagflation was witnessed across the world, especially in United States of America. And now what is stagflation? It means that there is no increase in economic growth, that is, economic growth is stagnant, okay, but there is inflation in the economy. That is why the word is stagflation. There is inflation but no economic growth. And why is that? Why is that? This is because the increase in oil prices did not lead to increase in economic growth. Okay, because they affected the supply. And what we call as cost push inflation. Okay, if the costs are increasing because of the supply chain mismanagement, then there will be inflation but there will be no economic growth, and that is why the word stagflation is used. Okay, stagnation plus inflation. Okay, the idea was that high demand for goods drive up prices and also encourages firms to hire more, and likewise high employment raises demand. Okay, the concept we just discussed. And then in 1970s and 80s this relationship broke down. Okay, two distinct kind of inflation, we already discussed it, demand pull and cost push. Okay, now let's see what are the characteristics of stagflation. The first is that there is economic slowdown. The second is that there is inflation, and third is that there is unemployment. These are the three characteristic features of stagflation. ठीक है, ये तीन characteristic features हैं stagflation के. Okay, now the definition of stagflation, it is a term that defines a situation characterized by simultaneous increase in prices and stagnation of economic growth. Okay, so this is the basic nature of stagflation. Okay, and that is why we have discussed stagflation, because it has been mentioned in the monthly policy review of Department of Economics by the Ministry of Finance. Okay, now who coined the term? The term stagflation was coined by Ian MacLeod, okay, a Conservative Party MP in the United Kingdom in 1965. And why is stagflation worst of both worlds? See, there are some things that are best of both worlds, but the stagflation is worst of both worlds. यानी कि ये दोनों दुनिया की गलत चीज है. कैसे? क्योंकि यहां पे इन्फ्लेशन भी है जो हम नहीं चाहते और यहां पे इकोनॉमिक स्लो डाउन भी है जो हम नहीं चाहते. सो दैट इज व्हाई इट इज द वर्स्ट ऑफ बोथ वर्ल्ड्स. ठीक है. सो वी हैव डिस्कस्ड दिस कॉन्सेप्ट ऑलरेडी. Now, what is the most famous case of stagflation? We already discussed it. When OPEC in 1970s, they raised the oil prices, because of which the supply of oil prices, supply cut was there, and because of which the oil prices increased, and that is why there was stagflation, especially in United States of America. Okay, we discussed this concept already. Now let's see what is the question related to it. Economic growth is usually coupled with what is the answer of this question? Is it coupled with deflation? Is it coupled with inflation? Is it coupled with stagflation, or is it coupled with hyperinflation? Please answer this question. Bittu is saying B, Mishra is saying B, Kanu is saying inflation, right? Okay. Hemandeep is also saying B. So, yes, the answer is correct. The UPSC answer key also says the answer is B, that is inflation. So, do you understand the relationship between inflation, economic growth, and what is stagflation? All these concepts should now be clear in your mind, as this is the foundation of economics. Okay. And you must be seeing that how many questions are there from the topic of inflation, and that is why it gains significance in our preparation for UPSC prelims. So do you agree, and do you understand this concept of inflation and stagflation? Okay. So we have discussed so far inflation and stagflation. Now let's move on to the next topic of foreign portfolio investment. Okay, foreign portfolio investments and the reason of their flight from our economy. Reason of their flight we will discuss later, but before that let's see what is foreign portfolio investment. Foreign portfolio investment यानी कि foreign विदेशी portfolio निवेश कुछ difficult नहीं है, it's very easy to understand. See, if there is a foreigner who wants to invest in India, then his or her investment is called foreign portfolio investment. This is the very brief definition of what foreign portfolio investment is. See, in our stock market, many of us, many of you might be investing in stock markets, buying stocks of different companies such as Reliance, such as Tata. Okay, now imagine if a person who is living in United States of America, इमेजिन करो अगर अमेरिका में कोई पर्सन रह रहा है एंड वो चाहता है कि मैं भी इंडिया के स्टॉक मार्केट में इन्वेस्ट करूं, मैं भी रिलायंस के शेयर लूं, मैं भी टाटा के शेयर्स लूं. सो व्हाट इज दैट? दैट इज फॉरेन पोर्टफोलियो इन्वेस्टमेंट ओनली. ओके, दैट इज FPI. ओके, but he does not have direct control on such investment. Yes Kannu, we will be coming to FDI in just a minute. Let's understand the FPI first, because the news is about FPI. Okay, but it's a great input anyway. So FPI is if someone is investing in the stocks of Indian company, a very brief definition. But you have to remember that FPI is not just limited to stocks or equities. It is also extended to debt. Okay, that is a foreign investors, if they are investing in government securities, if they are investing in corporate bonds in India, then also they are FPI. Okay, there is a distinction between equity and then debt, bonds. Okay, because equity is a partial ownership of that company, If you buy one share of Reliance, then you can say yes, I own this company to such and such percent. Okay, but if you are buying bond of that company, then you are essentially giving out loan. You are not partial owner of that company. Okay, so that is why FPI covers both equity as well as debt. Okay, this is an important distinction when we will discuss फॉरेन डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट, यानी कि विदेशी प्रत्यक्ष निवेश का जब हम डिस्कस करेंगे तो ये एक इंपॉर्टेंट डिफरेंस है एफपीआई और एफडीआई के बीच में. सो लेट्स सी व्हाट इज एफपीआई. फॉरेन पोर्टफोलियो इन्वेस्टमेंट इज एन इन्वेस्टमेंट, आई बेग योर पार्डन, foreign portfolio investment is an investment by non-residents in Indian securities, including shares, government bonds, corporate bonds, convertible securities, infrastructure securities, etc. Okay, so this is what FPI is. Now you must have heard about the term FII, that is Foreign Institutional Investors. इससे भी नहीं डरना है हमें. अगर कोई FPI है जो किसी इंस्टीट्यूशन की फॉर्म में आ रहा है, यानी कि अभी मैंने एग्जांपल दिया आपको कि अगर कोई जो है, इफ देयर इज अ पर्सन, कोई पर्सन है अमेरिका में जो यहां के स्टॉक्स में इन्वेस्ट करना चाहता है, देन वी कॉल दैट FPI. बट मान लो अमेरिका में कोई बहुत बड़ा इंस्टीट्यूशन है, कोई पेंशन फंड है जो इन्वेस्ट करना चाहता है गवर्नमेंट सिक्योरिटीज में इंडिया की या फिर स्टॉक मार्केट में इंडिया की, देन वी कॉल देम फॉरेन इंस्टीट्यूशनल इन्वेस्टमेंट. दिस इज द बेसिक डिफरेंस बिटवीन FPI एंड FII. ठीक है, ये सबसे बेसिक डिफरेंस है. नाउ लेट्स सी नेक्स्ट, what is the difference between FPI and FDI? It is important to understand the difference between FPI and FDI. FDI is विदेशी प्रत्यक्ष निवेश, foreign direct investment. So there is a thin line between FII and FDI. Let's see what is it. First, let's see what is FDI. FDI is defined as an investment in which a company strives for controlling ownership. Okay, company strives for controlling ownership of a business entity in another country. Therefore, foreign companies get directly involved with day-to-day operations. Now, let's see. We have seen the example of a person. In USA investing in Indian stocks. Okay. Now, think of it that there is a company in USA that wants to invest to such extent that it wants to start a manufacturing plant in India. So, they are essentially making foreign direct investment. They want ownership in India. They want ownership of a company in India. They want their physical presence. They want to profit from that company. Then that is what foreign direct investment is. अगर कोई स्टॉक में इन्वेस्ट कर रहा है, इट्स सिंपली FII. ठीक है, अभी वो भी देखेंगे कि कितने परसेंट तक FII है. बट लेट्स सी, अगर कोई खाली स्टॉक में इन्वेस्ट कर रहा है तो FII है. ठीक है, FPI है. बट अगर कोई कंपनी ये चाह रही है कि मैं वहां पे जमीन खरीद के ये कंपनी सेटअप करूं और वहां पे हम कुछ शुरू करें, एक बिजनेस ऑपरेशन शुरू करें, तो वो है FDI. दैट इज फॉरेन डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट. ठीक है, अगर एप्पल आ रहा है इंडिया में, एप्पल कह रहा है कि मैं यहां पे फोन मैन्युफैक्चर करूंगा, देन दैट इज फॉरेन डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट. ओके, अगर एप्पल कह रहा है कि मैं जो है थोड़े से शेयर्स खरीदता हूं रिलायंस के, देन दैट इज फॉरेन इंस्टीट्यूशनल इन्वेस्टमेंट FII. ठीक है, ये डिफरेंस है बेसिक. नाउ लेट्स सी. It is generally made in open economies that have a skilled workforce, growth prospects, and a significant as bringing money, knowledge, skills, and technology into that economy. Okay. Just a minute. Yes. So this is what FDI is. Now there are two routes: automatic route, where the person who is investing does not have to ask for permission, automatic, and then there is government route where permission is required. Okay. A very basic difference where permission is required, then that is government route, where automatic route where permissions are not required. Now let's see what are the important differences between FPI and FDI. Okay, FPI and FDI. Now see, if the investment in unlisted company is there, then there is FDI. अनलिस्टेड कंपनी में कोई भी इन्वेस्टमेंट है तो वो FDI है. लिस्टेड कंपनी यानी कि जैसे कोई बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज पर कोई कंपनी है, नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज पर कंपनी है कोई, अगर लिस्टेड कंपनी है तो उस पर अगर 10% से ज्यादा है इन्वेस्टमेंट तो वो FDI है, एंड लेस देन 10% इज FPI. ठीक है, लेस देन 10% इन्वेस्टमेंट इन स्टॉक्स एंड इक्विटीज in listed company is FPI, more than 10% is FDI. ठीक है, now FDI is there. Now FDI में मैंने क्या बताया कि the company wants to own that manufacturing unit or company in India. Okay, so will it be more stable or will FPI will more stable? अगर यहाँ पे कोई बड़ी फैक्ट्री ही खड़ी कर दे, ठीक है, तो वो मोर स्टेबल चीज है या फिर वो ज्यादा स्टेबल चीज है कि किसी ने स्टॉक खरीदा है यहाँ पे? प्लीज आंसर इन द चैट बॉक्स. स्टेबल क्या होगा, FDI स्टेबल होगा या FPI स्टेबल होगा? लॉन्ग टर्म के साथ कौन आ रहा है? कोई वो इंसान आ रहा है लॉन्ग टर्म के साथ जो बिजनेस ऑपरेशन खड़ा करना चाहता है इंडिया में, या फिर वो आ रहा है जो बस इन्वेस्ट करना चाहता है स्टॉक में और अपना पैसा बाहर निकाल के चला जाए? सो बिटू इज सेइंग एफडीआई, मिश्रा इज सेइंग एफडीआई, यमनदीप इज सेइंग एफडीआई, कन्नू इज सेइंग एफडीआई. ऑल ऑफ यू आर करेक्ट. एफडीआई इज मोर स्टेबल एंड मोर लॉन्ग टर्म. ठीक है. एफपीआई इज मेनली प्रॉफिट ओरिएंटेड, कि अपना पैसा लगाया, प्रॉफिट हुआ स्टॉक्स में, बाहर निकाला और चले गए. सो दैट इज व्हाई इट इज लेस स्टेबल, लेस स्टेबल. ठीक है. अच्छा, एफडीआई की एक और कैरेक्टरिस्टिक है. एफडीआई इज लार्जली नॉन डेट क्रिएटिंग. नॉन डेट क्रिएटिंग मीन्स कि समवन इज विलिंग टू इन्वेस्ट इन योर कंट्री. इट्स नॉट लाइक दे आर गिविंग लोन टू यू. ओके, अगर एप्पल यहां पे एक कंपनी सेटअप कर रहा है तो एप्पल किसी को कोई लोन नहीं दे रहा है. वो अपनी कैपिटल लाया, कंपनी सेटअप करी, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग यूनिट सेटअप करी और बिजनेस प्रोसेस शुरू कर दी. सो इट इज लार्जली नॉन डेट क्रिएटिंग. जबकि एफपीआई में स्टॉक्स में भी इन्वेस्ट हो सकता है और डेट में भी इन्वेस्ट हो सकता है. ठीक है. एक ये डिफरेंस है दोनों के बीच में. ये चीज समझ आई? डू यू अंडरस्टैंड दिस? ओके. One more important thing about FDI is when FDI comes into economy, then it brings technological expertise, managerial experience with it. Okay? अगर एप्पल यहां पर कोई मैन्युफैक्चरिंग यूनिट सेटअप कर रहा है तो इट मींस दे विल बी ब्रिंगिंग टेक्नोलॉजी इनटू आवर कंट्री. सो दैट इज वन ऑफ द बेनिफिट ऑफ एफडीआई. ठीक है. सो these are some important distinctions between FPI and FDI. Okay? Furthermore, FDI is largely sector specific. Sector specific. For example, again यही एग्जांपल, अगर एप्पल यहां पे कोई मैन्युफैक्चरिंग यूनिट सेटअप कर रहा है तो इट इज सेक्टर स्पेसिफिक. दैट इज इट इज वर्किंग इन द इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स कंपोनेंट सेक्टर. ठीक है. अगर कोई एफपीआई इन्वेस्ट कर रहा है तो इट इज डाइवर्सिफाइड. वो रिलायंस के भी शेयर खरीदेंगे, टाटा के भी शेयर खरीदेंगे. ठीक है. सो इट इज सेक्टर स्पेसिफिक, इट इज नॉट दैट मच सेक्टर स्पेसिफिक. ठीक है. सो दीज आर सम इंपॉर्टेंट डिस्टिंक्शंस दैट यू हैव टू रिमेंबर बिटवीन एफपीआई एंड एफडीआई. इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट टू रिमेंबर दैट. ठीक है. नाउ व्हाट आर द रीजंस ऑफ एफपीआई आउटफ्लोज? देखो, टू इंपॉर्टेंट रीजन है. आप कोई भी एडिटोरियल पढ़ो, दो इंपॉर्टेंट रीजन निकल कर आएंगे. फर्स्ट इज द ग्लोबल अनसर्टेनिटी. ग्लोबल अनसर्टेनिटी, ग्लोबल uncertainty because of रशिया यूक्रेन क्राइसिस. ठीक है. कोई भी वॉर होगी तो निवेशक क्या सोचेगा कि मैं अपना पैसा अपने घर लाके रखूं, किसी दूसरे कंट्री में क्यों रहने दूं. अगर कोई भी ग्लोबल अनसर्टेनिटी होगी तो विदेशी निवेशक अपना पैसा निकालेगा और अपने पास रखेगा. ठीक है. वो इन्वेस्ट करेगा गोल्ड में, वो इन्वेस्ट करेगा लैंड में, जो ज्यादा सर्टेन है कि उसके पास रहेंगे. ठीक है. ये चीज समझ में आई? फर्स्ट थिंग इज दैट इफ देयर इज ग्लोबल अनसर्टेनिटी द इन्वेस्टर विल पुल आउट देयर मनी फ्रॉम द इकोनॉमी. ठीक है. नाउ द सेकंड थिंग इज दैट द यूएस फेड रेट, इट हैज जस्ट इंक्रीज्ड बाय 75 बेसिस पॉइंट. नाउ अगर किसी निवेशक को अपनी कंट्री में ही ज्यादा इंटरेस्ट मिल रहा है, ठीक है, तो वो क्यों सोचेंगे कि हम किसी दूसरे देश में इन्वेस्ट करें. ठीक है. अगर इफ द इंटरेस्ट रेट्स आर इंक्रीजिंग इन देयर कंट्री ओनली, इफ द रिटर्न्स ऑन देयर इन्वेस्टमेंट्स आर इंक्रीजिंग इन देयर कंट्री, देन दे विल ट्राई टू इन्वेस्ट इन देयर कंट्री ओनली. ओके. They will not be attracted by the interest rates of foreign countries or other countries such as India. So these two are the most important reasons because of which the FPI flight is going on. FPI flight means that they are pulling out their money. Simple. ठीक है. So foreign portfolio investors which own around 19.5% of the market capitalization have pulled out rupees 42,000 crore in June so far, taking the total outflows to 2,60,000 crore since October 2021. ठीक है. इतना FPI outflow already हो चुका है. इसके रीजन, sell off is being attributed to tightening monetary policy. Tightening monetary policy means the US Fed rate is increasing its rate or decreasing its rate. Please answer in the chat box. Tight monetary policy means interest rates are increasing or decreasing. Please answer in the chat box. If the US Federal Bank is following tight monetary policy, does this mean they are increasing the interest rates or decreasing the interest rates? Kanu is saying increasing, yes. What about others? Mishra is saying increase, okay, good. Yamandeep is also saying increase. Miss Kaveri is also saying that it will increase. Olivia is also saying increase. Okay, awesome. All of you are very well versed about this concept. Okay, so these are two basic reasons because of which there is capital FPI capital outflows. Okay, all of this are related to that only. Now, what is the impact? What is the impact of FPI outflows? The first impact is very much visible. FPI कहाँ पर इन्वेस्ट हुआ था? ज्यादातर स्टॉक मार्केट में, ठीक है. Now, if they are pulling out their money, it will impact the stock market itself. ठीक है. Equities, the price of equities, they may go down. This is the first impact of FPI outflows. ठीक है. अब एक important चीज मुझे बताइए. Please tell me this one important concept. If the dollars, because FPI was invested in the form of dollars. Now, if dollars are being pulled out of our economy, what will that mean? Will it mean that dollars are becoming scarce or will it mean that dollars are becoming excess in our economy? ये बताइए, अगर डॉलर हमारी इकोनॉमी से, हमारी अर्थव्यवस्था से बाहर निकाले जा रहे हैं, तो इसका क्या मतलब है कि इंडिया में डॉलर की नंबर्स बढ़ रहे हैं या फिर घट रहे हैं? इंडिया में डॉलर की प्रेजेंस बढ़ रही है या फिर घट रही है? प्लीज आंसर इन द चैट बॉक्स. Okay, it means Rushi is saying forex reserve decrease, Kanu is saying supply of dollar decrease. Yes, very good. That is, in India the supply of dollar will decrease. ठीक है. Now, if the supply of dollar is decreasing, what does this mean? What does this mean? Will the dollar become more valuable or will it become less valuable? Please tell me this. Will the dollar will become more valuable or will the dollar become less valuable because of this? If the supply of dollar is decreasing in Indian economy. Let's see your concepts. Dollar appreciate hoga. Yamandeep is also saying it will become more valuable. Rushi is saying more valuable. Harsimran is also saying more valuable. Kaveri is saying more valuable. So, okay, if dollar is becoming more valuable with respect to Indian rupee, we can say either of two things, that the dollar is appreciating, or we can say that rupee is depreciating with respect to dollar. We can say that dollar is appreciating with respect to rupee, or we can say that rupee is depreciating with respect to dollar. ठीक है, दोनों के मीनिंग सेम है, दोनों के मीनिंग सेम है. इफ द डॉलर इज एप्रिशिएटिंग देन इट ऑटोमेटिकली मीन्स दैट रूपी इज डेप्रिशिएटिंग. ठीक है. नाउ सी, इफ द डॉलर इज एप्रिशिएटिंग एंड रूपी इज डेप्रिशिएटिंग, अगर रूपी डेप्रिशिएट हो रहा है, इट मीन्स कि रूपी कमजोर हुआ है. ठीक है. हम न्यूज़पेपर में हेडलाइंस पढ़ते हैं कि इंडियन रूपी वीकेंस बाय दिस मच. ओके, इट essentially means that rupee has been depreciated and it weakened by such and such amount. Now, if Indian rupee is weak, then it will mean that what we import into our economy, the bill of imports will increase. Okay, because rupee is weaker. Now, more amount of rupee is required to purchase that much amount of oil or other imported products. Do you understand this? See, डॉलर की सप्लाई कम हुई, दैट मीन्स डॉलर एप्रिशिएट हुआ. इट एसेंशियली मीन्स दैट रूपी डेप्रिशिएट हुआ. रूपी डेप्रिशिएट, वेट अ मिनट, हाँ, सो रूपी डेप्रिशिएट होना इज इक्विवेलेंट टू सेइंग दैट रूपी वीक हुआ. ठीक है. रूपी वीक हुआ मीन्स the purchasing capacity of Indian rupee decreased. The purchasing capacity of Indian rupee decreased. ठीक है. It means that what we import will be more expensive. What we import will be more expensive. Okay, what we import will be more expensive. Now think of it, we import 85% of our energy needs from other countries. ठीक है, ऑयल एंड नेचुरल गैस वी इंपोर्ट फ्रॉम अदर कंट्रीज. अब मैं कह रहा हूं कि रुपी वीक हो गया, तो इट एसेंशियली मीन्स कि जो हम इंपोर्ट कर रहे हैं ऑयल एंड नेचुरल गैस, वो हमारे लिए क्या हुई? महंगी हुई. महंगी हुई. डू यू एग्री? इफ रुपी इज वीक, it means its purchasing capacity is less, then it means that what we import will be more expensive for us. Then what does this mean? Will the price of oil and natural gas in India, they will increase or decrease? Will they increase or decrease? Please answer in the chat box. Please answer in the chat box. Anita is saying increase, Rushi is saying increase, Rakesh is saying increase, Bittu is saying increase. Yes. So now if the price of oil and natural gas in India increase, then what it will lead to is inflation. Inflation. So now you see how you can connect the dots, that you can connect the dot that there is FPI outflow, there is rupee depreciation, and there is inflation in economy. Okay, now you can connect the dots, and this kind of connecting the dots is necessary for you to solve Indian economy questions in prelims examination. Okay, so I hope you all understand this, and now let's see. And yeah, there was one more news, Black Swan event. Black Swan event was termed by Reserve Bank of India in its report. It was used by Reserve Bank of India in its report to say that there is very much less chance, but there is a chance whatsoever, 5% chance, there is a 5% chance that FPI outflows will occur to the tune of around $100 billion. Okay, $100 billion. That there is a less chance, but there is still a chance that FPI outflows will occur to the tune of around $100 billion, and that is what they termed as Black Swan event. So dear students, for more information on Black Swan event, there is a link in the description of this session or video. You please click on that link to understand what is Black Swan event in detail after the end of this session only. Okay, so now let's see what is the question related to this concept. What is the question related to this concept? With reference to foreign direct investment in India, which one of the following is considered its major characteristics? Major characteristic. It is the investment through capital instruments, essentially in a listed company. Okay, essentially in a listed company. It is largely non-debt creating capital flow. It is the investment which involves debt servicing. Okay, debt servicing means कि पे बैक करना लोन का, आपने कोई लोन लिया है उसको पे बैक करना इज अ डेट सर्विसिंग. ओके, एंड it is the investment made by foreign institutional investors in the government securities. Please answer this question. You can answer this question using the knowledge gained in this previous session on FPI. Please answer. Mr. Yamandeep is saying B. Yes, and Kanu has said events which are rare to occur and have negative impact. Yes, this is very much the definition of Black Swan event. There are 3 characteristics. Please see the video and you will know it. Anyway, so Ms. Shreya is saying the answer is B. Kanu is also saying there is answer B. Kaveri is saying answer is B. Okay. What about others? Please answer the question as well. Please answer the question. Okay, so the answer to this question is B, as per the answer key of UPSC only. See, the first thing is that it is investment through capital instruments, essentially in a listed company. We have seen that the investment can be in listed company or unlisted company. So this statement is wrong. The third statement is it is investment which involves debt servicing. We have seen that these are largely in equities because they seek ownership. Okay, they seek ownership. That is why third statement is also incorrect. The fourth statement, it is investment made by foreign institutional investors in government securities. The government securities are basically debt type, and we have seen that these are largely invested in equity to gain that ownership. Okay, so this statement is also incorrect. But we have seen that FDI is largely a non-debt creating capital flow. ठीक है, non-debt creating capital flow, and hence the answer is B. Now, this is the question that was asked in 2011. Okay, both foreign direct investment and foreign institutional investors are related to investment in a country. Best represents the important, which of the following statement best represents an important difference between the two? The first is FII helps bring better management skills and technology, while FDI only brings capital. The second is FII helps in increasing the capital availability in general, while FDI only targets specific sectors. Third is FDI flows into the secondary market while FII targets primary market. And D is FII is considered to be more stable than FDI. Please answer what is the correct answer in this of this 2011 prelims question. What is the answer of this question? Kanu is saying B, Pitu is saying B, Mishra is also saying B, Rushi is also saying B. Okay, good. Olivia is also saying B. Nice, it's great. The answer is B only as per the answer key of UPSC. FII helps in increasing capital availability in general, while FDI targets only specific sector. This is one of the characteristic and difference that we studied, that we discussed between FII, FPI and FDI. Okay, so now let's move on. So far we have discussed inflation, we have discussed stagflation, we have discussed foreign portfolio investment. Now let's see the next thing in line, that is twin deficit being a cause of concern for the Ministry of Finance. Monthly Economic Review यानी कि मासिक आर्थिक समीक्षा of May 2022, it flagged a concern related to twin deficit, दोहरा घाटा. देखिए, twin deficit, it means we are talking about two deficits, and these two deficits is, the first is fiscal deficit यानी कि राजकोषीय घाटा. The second is current account deficit यानी कि चालू खाता घाटा. ठीक है, current account deficit. Fiscal deficit is related to the government budget. The second, current account deficit, is related to imports and exports and external sector of the economy. We will be looking at it in brief. Okay, twin deficit, we first talk about the fiscal deficit. See, the fiscal deficit of the country, of the union government as well as the states, are high because of the COVID-19 crisis. Because COVID-19 crisis, fiscal and current account deficit. Yes, correct, Kanu. Anyway, so because of the COVID-19 crisis, the governments, the union government as well as state governments, they invested very much in infrastructure as well as providing relief to the people who lost their jobs, okay, and to the MSME sector of the country. So because of this relief, such as Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana, Garib Kalyan Rozgar Abhiyan, okay, all these schemes were undertaken to provide relief to the people during COVID-19 crisis, and these schemes were financed by money only. Okay, so when the revenue of the governments decreased and yet their expenses increased, then what is the difference between these two? The expenditure and revenue, it is the fiscal deficit only. ठीक है, जो आपने खर्च किया और जो आपकी आय है उसके बीच का डिफरेंस मोटा मोटा फिजिकल डेफिसिट कहा जाता है. इट्स अ वेरी सिंपल डेफिनेशन ऑफ फिजिकल डेफिसिट. ठीक है, So this report highlighted it states that government revenues take a hit following cuts in excise duties and diesels on petrol. You might be aware that डीजल और पेट्रोल पर एक्साइज ड्यूटी घटाई गई है ताकि लोगों को थोड़ी सी राहत पहुंचाई जा सके और इन्फ्लेशन को थोड़ा कंट्रोल किया जा सके, ठीक है। सो द गवर्नमेंट रेवेन्यूज डिक्रीज एंड अपसाइड रिस्क टू द बजटेड लेवल ऑफ ग्रॉस फिस्कल डेफिसिट हैज इमर्ज्ड। क्योंकि उनका रेवेन्यू घटा है, ये मंथली है, दैट इज व्हाई वी आर नॉट टेकिंग बिगर पर्सपेक्टिव, ठीक है। पहले हमने जब एक्साइज ड्यूटी घटाई पेट्रोल और डीजल पे, उसकी वजह से गवर्नमेंट के रेवेन्यू कम हुए, एंड दैट इज वाई जो गवर्नमेंट ने सोचा था अपने बजट में कि हम राजकोषीय घाटा इतना रखेंगे, उससे ज्यादा ही हो जाएगा अब, क्योंकि रेवेन्यू कम हुए तो गैप बढ़ गया, ठीक है। The fiscal deficit is essentially the amount of money that government has to borrow in any year to fill the gap between the expenditure and revenues. Same definition. आपका खर्चा है और आपकी आय है, उस चीज को फिल करने के लिए क्या आएगा? फिस्कल डेफिसिट आएगा, ठीक है। The Kannu is saying difference between total revenue and total expenditure other than borrowing. Yes, very correct definition, ठीक है। Higher levels of fiscal deficit typically imply that government eats into the pool of investable funds. यानी कि if there is higher fiscal deficit, then it means that government has to borrow more, then government has to pay more interest on its loans. Then that pool of investments that could have been invested in capital, okay, they are going into the debt servicing of the borrowing that government took, okay, in the market, which could have been used by the private sector for its own investments needs at a time when government is trying its best to kickstart and sustain a private sector investment cycle. Now, what is the meaning of this statement? The first is the government that could have invested those funds into capital, they are now going into debt servicing because they have to borrow more. So what is the benefit of capital expenditure? Okay, consider a government is constructing a road, ठीक है। Now the expenditure that is going into the construction of that road will be divided into two parts mostly. First is the labor cost, ठीक है, labor cost that will generate employment, ठीक है, employment. The second is the material cost, that is material cost, ठीक है। इस चीज में रोड को बनाने का खर्चा जाएगा, बट व्हाट वी ओवरलुक इन दिस कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर आर द वेरियस बेनिफिट्स। नाउ ये रोड किसी गांव और किसी शहर को ज्वाइन करेगी, सो नाउ द पीपल ऑफ दैट विलेज कैन एक्सेस बेटर एजुकेशन, वो अच्छी शिक्षा के लाभार्थी हो सकते हैं, दे कैन एक्सेस बेटर हेल्थ केयर, ठीक है, दे हैव मोर एम्प्लॉयमेंट अपॉर्चुनिटीज इन द सिटी नाउ वेयर दे डू नॉट हैव टू माइग्रेट, ठीक है। तो ये माइग्रेशन पे भी रोक लगा सकता है। तो रोड पे पैसा खर्च हुआ तो एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेट हुआ, मटेरियल आया, उसकी वजह से इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ भी हुई, बट बहुत सारी अलग चीजें भी हुई कि नाउ शिक्षा, हेल्थ केयर, इन सब चीजों के भी लाभार्थी हो सकते हैं। यहां पे लॉजिस्टिक्स कॉस्ट डिक्रीज हो जाएगी, ट्रांसपोर्टेशन कॉस्ट डिक्रीज हो जाएगी। So this is what is known as multiplier effect, and that is why the report says कि जो पैसा कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर में जा सकता था, जिसका मल्टीप्लायर इफेक्ट होता है, वो अब बोरोइंग में जा सकता है, उसकी डेट सर्विसिंग में जाएगा, ठीक है। So this is what the report is saying. Now the second thing that the report is saying, a very important concept that the report highlights, is that of crowding out. Now see, there is a limited amount of fund that are available for loans, Now if the government is taking this much loan from that pool, okay, these are the funds that are available for loans, these are funds that are provided by depositors of banks, okay, by investors that are available for loan. इतना pool है जिससे लोन लिया जा सकता है, ठीक है। अब लोन लेने वाले कौन है? गवर्नमेंट है, ठीक है, प्राइवेट कंपनीज हैं। तो अब गवर्नमेंट अगर इतना हिस्सा खुद के लोन के लिए ले लेगा, ठीक है, ये गवर्नमेंट के लोन में चला गया 25%, ठीक है। Now 75% इज अवेलेबल फॉर प्राइवेट। अब वो भी लोन ले सकते हैं, एमएसएमई सेक्टर लोन ले सकता है, बड़े कंपनीज लोन ले सकते हैं ताकि वो अपना बिजनेस एक्सपेंड कर सके, ठीक है। बट सपोज there is high fiscal deficit. High fiscal deficit means that the government needs to borrow more now, कि गवर्नमेंट को अपनी बोरोइंग ज्यादा करनी पड़ेगी तभी तो वो उस गैप को फिल करेगी। अब गवर्नमेंट गई इस पूल के पास कि भाई हमें चाहिए लोन, वी वांट सम लोन। नाउ गवर्नमेंट ने कहा क्या कि हमारा फिजिकल डेफिसिट बहुत हाई है, वी विल बी नीडिंग हाई बोरोइंग नाउ, वी विल बी नीडिंग मोर मनी एज लोन। अब गवर्नमेंट गई इस मार्केट में और गवर्नमेंट ने 75% पूल गवर्नमेंट का हो गया, लोन में चला गया। अब बस 25% बचा जो प्राइवेट सेक्टर के पास एक्सेसिबल है। सो इट एसेंशियली मीन्स दैट गवर्नमेंट इज क्राउडिंग आउट प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट। Government is crowding out private investment in a time when we need to kickstart the private consumption cycle, private investment cycle, ठीक है। तो it essentially means कि अगर गवर्नमेंट ने ज्यादा लोन ले लिया तो जो फंड्स होंगे लोन के लिए वो प्राइवेट कंपनीज के पास कम होंगे, जबकि इस टाइम पे प्राइवेट कंपनीज को कोविड-19 के बाद अपनी इन्वेस्टमेंट साइकिल, अपनी बिजनेस प्रोसेस शुरू करने के लिए जब ज्यादा लोन चाहिए तब उनके पास कम अमाउंट ऑफ लोन होगा लेने के लिए। सो इट मींस द गवर्नमेंट इज क्राउडिंग आउट प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट्स, ओके, ठीक है। सो दिस इज व्हाट the philosophy, this is what the concept behind these two statements is, the multiplier effect and the investor crowding out effect, ठीक है। Now let's move on to in deficit, current account deficit. We have talked about the fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit में we talked about कि क्या राजकोषीय घाटा था। current account deficit is very simple student, understand it as what is the difference between the trade। देखो current account deficit में दो चीजें होंगी, एक तो आपका ट्रेड का हो जाएगा कि आपका जो इंपोर्ट और एक्सपोर्ट के बीच का आ रहा है डिफरेंस, ट्रेड डेफिसिट हो गया। इसके साथ हम सर्विसेज इंक्लूड कर दें, इसके साथ हम आपके रेमिटेंसेस इंक्लूड कर दें, तो हम पूरा करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट निकाल सकते हैं। ये हम समझेंगे एक चार्ट से। और एक और न्यूज जो करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट से है वो ये है कि हमने सोचा था, व्हाट वी थॉट वाज करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट विल बी अराउंड 1.5% फॉर द प्रीवियस फाइनेंशियल ईयर, ठीक है, बट इट केम आउट टू बी अराउंड 1.2% because the factor incomes they decreased, however the trade deficit increased, but it was compensated by remittances and services. Let's see, it will become more clearer. See, this is the current account, चालू खाता, ठीक है। अब इसमें क्या है, ट्रेड इन गुड्स हो रहा है। चालू खाता मींस करंट अकाउंट एसेंशियली मींस देयर इज नो इंक्रीज इन एसेट्स, नो इंक्रीज और डिक्रीज इन एसेट्स, ठीक है। Increase and decrease in assets happen in capital account, but we are concerned with current account only here. So current account में आया trade in goods, आपने जो है ब्रास की मूर्तियां बाहर भेजी, ठीक है, you are sending out sculptures, brass sculptures, that is an export of brass sculptures that will happen in trade in goods. You are importing oil and natural gas, part of trade in good, ठीक है। Now there is trade in services as well. ट्रेड इन सर्विसेज मींस कि अगर बाहर से आके, अमेरिका से आके कोई इंसान यहाँ पे काम कर रहा है तो उसको जो हम सैलरी दे रहे हैं दैट इज ट्रेड इन, दैट इज नेट फैक्टर इनकम, एंड देयर इज नेट नॉन फैक्टर इनकम, यानी कि हम बाहर अमेरिका घूमने गए, हमने वहां पे खर्चा किया, ठीक है, तो इट एसेंशियली मींस कि हमने टूरिज्म का मोड यूज किया सर्विसेज में, ठीक है। एंड देन देयर इज ट्रांसफर पेमेंट, मींस कि गल्फ कंट्री में कोई एनआरआई रह रहा है जो वहां पे काम कर रहा है बट अपनी सैलरी का कुछ हिस्सा यहां भारत भेज रहा है। द पर्सन इज वर्किंग इन गल्फ कंट्री बट दे आर सेंडिंग अ पार्ट ऑफ देयर सैलरी टू इंडिया टू सपोर्ट देयर फैमिली, that is remittance, okay, and there is a fact that India is one of the highest remittance receiving country in the world because of its great diaspora, okay. Now current account has trade in goods, trade in services and transfer payments. Now see, trade deficit तो बड़ा है हमारा, trade deficit हमारा बड़ा है, but net outgo from the primary income largely reflected net income payments on foreign investment decreased sequentially. Now याद करो हमने एफपीआई की बात करी थी, ठीक है। अब मान लो एफपीआई किसी बॉन्ड में इन्वेस्ट करता है इंडिया का, ठीक है, मान लो कि किसी बॉन्ड में इन्वेस्ट करता, बॉन्ड में इंटरेस्ट देना पड़ता है, बॉन्ड में इंटरेस्ट देना पड़ता है, ठीक है। अब जो हम इंटरेस्ट उस बॉन्ड होल्डर को दे रहे हैं अमेरिका में जो बैठा है, ठीक है, वो क्या होगा, वो क्या होगा, फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट, पेमेंट्स ऑन फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट, ठीक है, ठीक है। तो ये होगा पेमेंट्स ऑन फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट जो हम उसे भेज रहे हैं इंटरेस्ट बाहर। एनीवे ये हिस्सा कम हुआ है, ठीक है, नेट फैक्टर इनकम जो हम बाहर भेज रहे हैं, तो ये हमारे लिए अच्छी चीज है, पॉजिटिव चीज है ये, ठीक है। एक मिनट, ये हमारे लिए पॉजिटिव चीज है, ये हमारे लिए नेगेटिव चीज हुई है। और ट्रांसफर पेमेंट्स, प्राइवेट ट्रांसफर रिसिप्ट्स मेनली रिफ्लेक्टिंग रेमिटेंसेस बाय इंडियंस एम्प्लॉयड ओवरसीज इंक्रीज टू $23.7 बिलियन। सो ये चीज भी हमारी पॉजिटिव हुई है। तो ट्विन डेफिसिट में करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट की जो न्यूज है वो सिंपली ये है कि हमारा ट्रेड डेफिसिट तो बड़ा है, our trade deficit increased but it was somewhat cushioned by less income outflow and higher transfer payments to India, ठीक है, very simple concept. My purpose was just to show that current account consists of trade in goods, trade in services and transfer payments, and twin deficit consists of fiscal deficit and current account deficits, ठीक है। Now let's see. Now this is a very important statement. This is also one of those linkages. The ministry's worry is that costlier import costly हुए such as crude oil and other commodities will not only widen the CAD. See, oil and natural gas, costly imports means trade in goods का deficit बढ़ जाएगा। यहां तक हम समझे, चलिए आगे बढ़ते हैं। Also put downward pressure on the rupee, ठीक है। करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट अगर बढ़ रहा है तो इट विल ऑल्सो पुट अ डाउनवर्ड प्रेशर ऑन द रूपी, ठीक है। अ वीकर रूपी इन टर्न विल मेक फ्यूचर इंपोर्ट्स कॉस्टलियर। दिस इज वन मोर रीजन दैट रूपी में वीकन, ठीक है। इंपोर्ट्स कॉस्टलियर बन सकते हैं जिसकी वजह से रूपी और वीक होता जाएगा क्योंकि करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट बढ़ रहा है। तो ये एक लिंकेज है जो पहले हम ऑलरेडी एस्टैब्लिश कर चुके हैं, ठीक है। Other thing is also that कि foreign portfolio investors continue to pull out money from Indian markets, then that too will hurt the Indian rupee, it will weaken, ठीक है, good. So yes, anyway let's move forward. This is the question that you would need to solve. You only tell me whether this statement is true or this statement is false. With reference to Indian public finance, consider the following statements. The upward trend in the ratio of fiscal deficit of GDP a recent year has an adverse effect on private investment. Fiscal deficit अगर बढ़ रहा है तो ये प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट पे जो है एडवर्स अफेक्ट रखेगा या फिर नहीं। प्लीज आंसर whether this statement is true or whether this statement is false. Just answer me this statement only. Please answer in the chat box कि अगर फिजिकल डेफिसिट बढ़ रहा है तो हमारा एडवर्स अफेक्ट होगा प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट पे या नहीं, प्लीज बताएं। So please tell me in the chat box. Please tell me in the chat box कि एडवर्स अफेक्ट होगा या नहीं होगा। Okay, so Shivam is saying yes, Rushi is saying yes, Bittu is saying true, Shreya is also saying yes, Rushi is true, Kaveri true, Anita true, Kanu true, Rushi yes. Okay, so all of you are answering the correct answer that it will have an adverse effect on private investment. So we have discussed about inflation, stagflation, we have discussed about foreign portfolio investments and reason of their flight. We have discussed about twin deficit now. Okay, now let's move forward. Now let's move forward and discuss about fertilizer subsidy now. Let's move forward and discuss about fertilizer subsidy now. Just a sec. Am I audible now? Am I audible? Okay, so we are going to discuss this topic in very brief, that is fertilizer subsidy, उर्वरक राज्य सहायता. देखो, in the India is very much dependent on agriculture. More than 50% of its population is dependent on agriculture. Okay, so India has a vast area for agriculture, around 160 million hectares. Okay, it has around 169 million hectares of land to do agriculture upon. India is also a very rich climate for agriculture. It has average annual rainfall of around 1200 millimeter. Okay, but one thing that it lacks is the mineral fertilizer. After green revolution, the need for fertilizer was felt, because before agriculture, green revolution, the agriculture was not that intensive. Okay, the agriculture was not that intensive, and the soil was able to support the crops that were grown. Now after green revolution, the agriculture became more intensive. Now the soil has to provide more nutrients, they were not being left fallow, so the need for fertilizer automatically and logically came in. Okay, and that is why we are going to see what is fertilizer subsidy. ठीक है, उर्वरक राज्य सहायता क्या है? Recently we are seeing that government has budgeted around 105 lakh crores of fertilizer subsidy, but now it is going to push over even rupees 2 lakh crores because of some circumstances in the international market. Rise in oil and natural gas prices is one of the reason because of which the fertilizer prices are increasing. Now see, the fertilizer prices are increasing, but the government needs to provide fertilizer at an affordable rate to the farmers. कि इंटरनेशनल मार्केट में, अंतरराष्ट्रीय बाजार में फर्टिलाइजर के, उर्वरक के दाम तो बढ़ रहे हैं, पर हमारी सरकार को फार्मर्स को जो पहुंचाना है फर्टिलाइजर, जो उर्वरक पहुंचाना है, वो एक अफोर्डेबल प्राइस पे पहुंचाना है. तो नेचुरली द सब्सिडी that the government has to provide on those fertilizer will increase. So now we are going to see what is the mechanism of fertilizer subsidy in India. Now see, fertilizer is need to grow food as well, not food crops. It is the second largest subsidy that the government provides for growing crops. Okay? The largest subsidy that is provided in the budget is that of food. The second largest subsidy that is provided by the government is that of fertilizer, 105 lakh crores, that is budgeted by the Ministry of Finance this year only. The budget that was present in this year, it is the subsidy being provided in that. Okay? And this is the subsidy provided for food. Food subsidy goes for MSP as well as food management. Okay? So you can essentially see that the subsidy that is provided for fertilizers is almost as half for growing food, for managing food in the country. Okay? Now let's see more about fertilizer subsidy. Okay? The growing of crops need major type of nutrients. There are three major type of nutrients. The first is nitrogen, the second is phosphorus, and the third is potassium. Okay? The nitrogen is provided by urea, it is provided by ammonium nitrate, it is provided by ammonium sulfate. Okay? There are various kind of nitrogenous fertilizers, out of which urea is the most famous one. यूरिया इज अ वाइट कलर्ड पाउडर, ठीक है, एंड इट कंटेन्स अराउंड 46% नाइट्रोजन, ठीक है, एंड 45 किलोग्राम टू 50 किलोग्राम बैग ऑफ यूरिया कम्स इन द मार्केट, ठीक है. So it is one of the nitrogenous fertilizer and not the only nitrogenous fertilizer, ठीक है. There are various other kind of nitrogenous fertilizer as well. Phosphorus is provided by monoammonium phosphate or diammonium phosphate, and potassium is provided by muriate of potash, NPK, what we call as. Now the ideal ratio that we have to provide of NPK, the ideal ratio that we have to provide for NPK is 4:2:1, 4:2:1, ठीक है. But we will be seeing how this ratio is disturbed. We will be seeing how this ratio is being disturbed because of overuse of urea. But before that, let's see what is the history of fertilizer subsidy in India is. The fertilizer subsidy was not present before 1970s in India, ठीक है. It came into being after 1970s only. It's not like fertilizer subsidy was being provided from the start of Indian independence. No. In 1957, the government promulgated Fertilizer Control Order in 1957 to regulate what? Sale, pricing and quality of fertilizer. Furthermore, in 1973, the fertilizer movement was being controlled by Movement Control Order. In 1977, the fertilizer subsidy came into being. No subsidy was paid on fertilizer before 1997. In 1973, oil crisis, the one we talked about when we were discussing stagflation. Remember when I told you that in 1970s, OPEC countries, they increased the price of oil and natural gas. जब हम स्टैगफ्लेशन डिस्कस कर रहे थे, वही चीज यहां पर हुई. ऑयल एंड नेचुरल गैस के प्राइस इंक्रीज हुए. नेचुरल गैस इज अ रॉ मटेरियल फॉर प्रोडक्शन ऑफ फर्टिलाइजर, तो फर्टिलाइजर के दाम बढ़े. फर्टिलाइजर के दाम बढ़े तो अगेन वही कॉन्सेप्ट आया कि सरकार को तो फर्टिलाइजर एक अफोर्डेबल रेट पे पहुंचाना पड़ेगा किसान को, ठीक है. सो दैट इज व्हाई फर्टिलाइजर सब्सिडी वाज इंट्रोड्यूस्ड 1977 में. 1992 आ गया. 1992 किस चीज के लिए फेमस है? 1991 में क्या हुआ था? क्या आया था? कौन से रिफॉर्म्स हुए थे 1991 में? प्लीज टेल मी इन द चैट बॉक्स, कौन कौन से रिफॉर्म हुए थे? एलपीजी रिफॉर्म्स, लिबरलाइजेशन शुरू हुआ 1991 में, ठीक है. उसके बाद गवर्नमेंट ने क्या किया? डी कंट्रोल कर दिया इंपोर्ट ऑफ कॉम्प्लेक्स फर्टिलाइजर सच एज डीएपी, सच एज म्यूरिएट ऑफ पोटैश इन 1992. बट इंपोर्ट ऑफ यूरिया आज के दिन तक इंपोर्ट ऑफ यूरिया इज कंट्रोल्ड, इट इज कैनलाइज्ड. मींस कुछ कंपनीज ही हैं गिनी चुनी जो इंपोर्ट कर सकती हैं यूरिया को इंडिया में, ठीक है. यूरिया इज द मोस्ट प्रोड्यूस्ड, इट इज द मोस्ट कंज्यूम्ड, इट इज द मोस्ट इंपोर्टेड फर्टिलाइजर इन इंडिया, एंड येट इट्स इंपोर्ट इज स्टिल कंट्रोल्ड, ठीक है. इट्स अ वेरी आयरॉनिकल फैक्ट. एनीवे, लेट्स मूव ऑन. सो फर्टिलाइजर सब्सिडी को हम दो चीज में डिवाइड कर सकते हैं. यूरिया, क्योंकि यूरिया अभी हमने देखा ये कोई स्पेशल ही फर्टिलाइजर है हमारे लिए, तो इसकी सब्सिडी भी हम अलग से प्रोवाइड करेंगे. यूरिया सब्सिडी एंड नॉन यूरिया सब्सिडी. द फर्टिलाइजर सब्सिडी इज प्रोवाइडेड एज अ सेंट्रल सेक्टर स्कीम. सेंट्रल सेक्टर स्कीम मींस कि ये गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया प्रोवाइड करती है, इसमें स्टेट्स का नहीं है कोई रोल, ठीक है. तो सेंट्रल सेक्टर स्कीम प्रोवाइडेड बाय डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ फर्टिलाइजर्स अंडर मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ केमिकल एंड फर्टिलाइजर, नॉट मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर बट मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ केमिकल एंड फर्टिलाइजर, ठीक है. ये कंफ्यूजिंग फैक्ट है, इसलिए आप ये चीज याद रखिएगा. अब फर्टिलाइजर सब्सिडी को हमने दो में डिवाइड करा, यूरिया एंड नॉन यूरिया. यूरिया बहुत फेमस है क्योंकि हमें नाइट्रोजन की बहुत जरूरत पड़ती है अपने सॉइल्स में. इंडिया के सॉइल्स नाइट्रोजन में काफी डेफिशिएंट है, प्लस नाइट्रोजन एक मैक्रो न्यूट्रिएंट है. पोटेशियम एंड फास्फोरस भी मैक्रो न्यूट्रिएंट है, बट नाइट्रोजन एज वी सॉ कि इसको हमें लार्जर क्वांटिटीज में चाहिए होता है. कौन से रेशियो में? 4:2:1. तो यानी कि 4 किलो नाइट्रोजन चाहिए और 2 किलो हमें फास्फोरस चाहिए और 1 किलो हमें पोटेशियम चाहिए, तब जाके हम एक हेल्दी सॉइल स्ट्रक्चर डेवलप कर सकते हैं. तो इसमें आप देख रहे हैं कि 4 किलो तो स्टिल हमें नाइट्रोजन के चाहिए. नाइट्रोजन सबसे ज्यादा मिलता है किसमें? यूरिया में. सबसे ज्यादा मतलब सबसे कन्वीनियंट फॉर्म में मिलता है, ठीक है. तो इसलिए यूरिया को हमने एक अलग ही सब्सिडी कैटेगरी में रखा हुआ है. सो यूरिया सब्सिडी देखते हैं. यूरिया की सब्सिडी बहुत सिंपल है समझना. सी, द यूरिया सब्सिडी इज बेसिकली गवर्नमेंट टेल्स द प्राइस कि इतने प्राइस पे यूरिया मार्केट में बिकेगा। नाउ भले ही इंटरनेशनल मार्केट में यूरिया का प्राइस 3500 to 4000 हो पर किलो, पर बैग, सॉरी, ओके, इतना हो, बट इंडिया में अभी भी हम इसे 260 या 300 रुपए के बीच में एमआरपी इसका तय है। और इसके बीच का जो डिफरेंस है, द प्राइसेस इन इंटरनेशनल मार्केट्स एंड द प्राइसेस एट विच वी आर प्रोवाइडिंग इट टू फार्मर्स, द गैप बिटवीन दैट इज एसेंशियली द यूरिया सब्सिडी। ठीक है, इट इज एसेंशियली द यूरिया सब्सिडी. It is a central sector scheme again. Now, because we are providing such heavy subsidies to urea, then it means that there are some problems associated with it. देखो, फार्मर को लग रहा है कि ये फर्टिलाइजर है, फर्टिलाइजर यूज करेंगे तो ज्यादा अच्छी क्रॉप्स उगेंगी। उसको ये नहीं पता कि हमें एक 4:2:1 का रेशियो मेंटेन करके चलना है। उसे पता है कि ये बैग है, इसे हमने डाला और अच्छी क्रॉप उगेगी, एंड ये सस्ता भी मिल रहा है, सब्सिडाइज है। तो व्हाट हैपेंस इज दैट इट्स ओवर यूज अकर्स। ओवर यूज से क्या होगा? there will be some ecological consequences such as eutrophication of water bodies, such as nitrous oxide released in the atmosphere, which is a greenhouse gas. ठीक है, and then there is issue of availability. हमने देखा कि इसका import अभी भी controlled है। import control होने का मतलब क्या है कि इसकी availability ensure करना पूरे इंडिया में अभी भी एक difficult task है कि कहां पर कितना चाहिए, क्योंकि अभी भी controlled है, मार्केट नहीं, गवर्नमेंट कंट्रोल कर रही है। Then there is inefficient fertilizer manufacturer. फर्टिलाइजर यूरिया सब्सिडी क्या है? जो दाम मान लो 300 रुपए का मार्केट में है, ठीक है, और मान लो 3000 का बना रही है कंपनी। लेट्स सपोज 3000 का बना रही है, 300 रुपए का मार्केट में है, इसका डिफरेंस यूरिया सब्सिडी है। अब अगर इन जो है ये यूरिया जो बन रहा है, ये मान लो 4000 का बनने लगे, ठीक है, तो वो इसका डिफरेंस भी यूरिया सब्सिडी है। तो जो मैन्युफैक्चरर है उसके पास इंसेंटिव नहीं है कि हम एक एफिशिएंट प्रोसेस यूज करें ताकि हमारी सब्सिडी कम से कम जाए। नहीं, उसके पास ये इंटरेस्ट नहीं है, उसे सब्सिडी मिल रही है, तो उसको ये है कि हम कोई भी प्रोसेस यूज करें, यूरिया बनाए, सब्सिडी हमें मिलेगी। सो थर्ड इशू इज दैट इनएफिशिएंट फर्टिलाइजर मैन्युफैक्चरर। लीकेजेस। अब यूरिया का यूज जो एप्लीकेशन है, इट्स नॉट जस्ट रिस्ट्रिक्टेड टू एग्रीकल्चर, it also goes to other industries as well, ठीक है। एंड अगर वो अदर इंडस्ट्रीज इस सब्सिडाइज रेट को नहीं फॉलो कर पा रही, तो क्या होता है कि यहां से जो यूरिया फर्टिलाइजर है लीक होके उन इंडस्ट्रीज में जाता है। सो देयर इज एन इशू ऑफ लीकेजेस एंड देयर इज एन इशू ऑफ फिस्कल बर्डन मींस this year only in the budget around 63,000 crores were budgeted for urea subsidy. And we already saw the fertilizer subsidy is the budgeted at rupees 105 lakh crores. It is a very, very, very huge amount, students. ठीक है, a very huge amount indeed. And as well as furthermore, this amount is now going to cross rupees 2 lakh crore because of the externalities in the international market. Furthermore, let's see what are the steps taken. These are the steps taken to minimize the harmful effects of urea as well as control its overuse. Okay, you can look at the slide at the later time, okay, or pause this video to look at the slide. And then there is nutrient based subsidy. For non-urea fertilizer, there is nutrient based subsidies where the government tells the manufacturer that we are going to provide you subsidy per nutrient only. Now I'll give you an example. First thing is that for non-urea fertilizer there is no controlled price. So let's say in diammonium phosphate there is 46% phosphorus and there is 18% nitrogen. Diammonium phosphate is a non-urea fertilizer and hence it will come under the regime of nutrient based subsidy. ठीक है, nutrient based subsidy. That is why. Now see, 1 ton of diammonium phosphate has to be produced now. 1 ton means 1000 kilo. 1000 kilo DAP में 460 किलो फॉस्फोरस का होगा। 460 किलो फॉस्फोरस का होगा, हम उसको इससे मल्टीप्लाई करेंगे जो सब्सिडी गवर्नमेंट दे रही है इनटू 460, ठीक है, कोई वैल्यू आएगी। 18% नाइट्रोजन का होगा, तो 1000 किलो में 18% मीन्स 180 kg, तो हम इसको मल्टीप्लाई करेंगे इससे। अब 1 टन डीएपी के प्रोडक्शन में जो सब्सिडी आएगी वो इन दोनों का सम होगी, जो भी नंबर आएगा। सो दिस इज व्हाट न्यूट्रिएंट बेस्ड सब्सिडी इज। ड्यू टू द पॉसिटी ऑफ टाइम आई हैव टू गो फास्ट, ओके, सो प्लीज ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड। Now, direct benefit transfer is basically the government transfers the subsidy to the retailers after they have been purchased by after the fertilizer has been purchased by the farmers. So it is this only, direct benefit transfer. And direct cash transfer is a pilot scheme. It is in the making that why don't we directly transfer the cash to buy fertilizers to the farmers, okay. So direct benefit transfer is where the cash, the money goes to the retailers, okay, and then to the fertilizer manufacturer after they have been bought. And direct cash transfer is a scheme that is in making, that government wants to implement, that why don't we transfer the money requirement for fertilizer buying to the farmers accounts itself, ठीक है. Now cursor of fertilizer subsidy, these are same as that before, overuse and all. Now the issues that can be summed up is high fiscal burden, import dependency on fertilizer sector, imbalanced use of fertilizers due to subsidy regime, ecological impact of excessive fertilizer uses, ठीक है. And solutions are greener alternatives, direct cash transfers, awareness and rationalization of subsidy. Now there is something called Non-Urea. I highly encourage you to follow the link in the description below and look at how Non-Urea works in a separate video, ठीक है. Now this is one of the prelims 2020 question. Now I want you to ask only this first statement, ठीक है. Please look at it and answer. This says at present the retail price of chemical fertilizer is market driven and not administered by the government. Please answer this. Rushi is saying, sir, please provide PDF. Okay, I'll try. Please answer this, whether this statement is true or whether this is false. Okay, Bittu is saying it is a false statement. At present, the retail price of chemical fertilizer is market driven and not administered by the government. Yes, Shreya, you are also having the right answer. It is a false statement. Why? Why is it the false statement? Because the price of urea is still administered. Okay, it is still administered as MRP by the government. So you all are having the right answer, and the correct answer for this question is B, that is 2 and 3. But due to the paucity of the time, again we are just solving the first statement only. Okay, and this is your question of the day. Seize the mains questions. Please note it down. What are the various issues associated with fertilizer subsidy in India and suggest measures to resolve them. Suggest measures to resolve them. What are the various issues associated with the fertilizer subsidy in India? Suggest measures to resolve them. Dear students, you can write down this mains answer and submit your answer in the link provided in the description below. Okay, it essentially directs to our site where you can submit your answer. Please note it down. Please note it down right now or at a later stage. Okay, and now we have covered all the important things that we wanted to in this session, and I want to thank you all for listening, and I hope you had a great learning experience. In the next class we will be seeing something related to goods and services tax, and in the end I want to introduce you all to the HCS prelims test series that our institute is providing free of cost. So I highly encourage you to enroll in this free series and attempt the questions and see where you stand and before taking the actual HCS exams. So I want to thank you all for listening. Thank you so much. I hope you had a great learning experience. Thank you.